if you read the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 7, verses 1 through 5.
Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye.
Thank you, Weldon. May God bless this reading of His holy word. I have misplaced my glasses someplace, and I don't know whether they're over here or where they are. I had them when I came in. And, well, did something ever escape you and you never knew what you did with it? Well, that's what happened to me. I brought these glasses. I got tired of the ones around my neck all the time, and so I put them somewhere. Obviously, I put them somewhere. That's
Hey,
okay.
Ray, you found out what that cord does, keep it up in glasses.
Well, I thought, if I'm gonna play the accordion, those glasses will be around my neck, and I won't be able to. But, I won't be able to play the accordion. Of course, I don't play it all that well to begin with, but the glasses, of course, would. But I was worried a little bit.
Did you put them in the case?
Well, no, you know who said that, Don? It may well be where they are. No, they're not there. Well, I did bring them. Anyway, I'm speaking tonight on a most unusual passage of scripture. This gospel lesson is the most psychological, spiritual, insightful remarks in all of the New Testament. This is an amazing passage of scripture. And let's face it, a favorite pastime of so many Christians, I don't know what I did with them. They just walked off. I think the coronavirus got them or something. Anyway, a favorite pastime of all people, Christians and people alike, are to criticize other people. That's okay. They've heard everything I've said in 15 years anyway. So. No, we love to criticize. And you know another thing about churches? I'll tell you something about churches. They love to shoot their wounded. Just let some dear soul make some kind of a moral mistake or have a problem of some sort when it comes to morality or this type of thing. We line them up, take a machine gun, supposedly, of course, not accurately, and machine gun them down. They think we're better than they are. We think that, but undoubtedly, it's a magnificent means. You know what this is? It's a magnificent means of turning a mirror on ourselves to see what usually remains in us that's unseen. Why we ought to ask, do we find precisely this sin? Why do we find the sins in others particularly annoying to us? Other people's wrongs are very annoying. And why does that trait of something someone else does gall us? Undoubtedly, Jesus implies it reminds us of something similar failing in our own lives. I remember my Boy Scout master. He was a great guy. And he asked us one evening in a weekly scout meeting, and man, this is years and years ago, to call to mind a person that we found hard to get along with. A person that we really did not care for, and a person that was very hard to take. We've all had it. And then to recount in detail the characteristics that made this person so obnoxious to us. Why is this person so obnoxious to us? Then my scoutmaster, Ed McClinic, recommended that when we go home and we go to our rooms, us boys, to ask God to forgive those same faults in our own lives. And I'll never forget his words that really made an impact on my life. And I did ask the Lord that night. I was just about 15, 14 years old. I said, Lord, please forgive Ray Harris for being such a hypocrite. There was a doctor, a man who went to his to see his doctor, and he had a terrible state of anxiety. And he said, Doctor, he said, you gotta help me, I'm dying. Everywhere I touch, it hurts. I touch my head, it hurts. I touch my leg, it hurts. I touch my stomach, it hurts. I touch my chest, it hurts. You've got to help me, Doc. Everything I touch hurts. And the doctor gave him a complete examination. He said, Mr. Smith, he said, I have good news and bad news for you. He said, the good news is you're not dying. And the bad news is you've broken your finger. So everything he touched naturally it hurt. We live in a broken and hurting world, which can leave us in a serious state of anxiety and frustration and depression. People we love can make very poor decisions, which cause an unbelievable amount of pain, emotional pain to us. And yet we want to help. We want to do what we can to help them. But how do we help? How do we help people that are different than we are, that have made a lot of mistakes? And how do we help people recover from their failures? How do we help people get out of the trap they're in when it comes to their sinful lives and things they do that are wrong? Well, Jesus tells us how. He tells us how to help people experiencing the pain, whether it be emotional or physical, that another person may be going through as a result of some mistake they made, sin or emotional pain that has happened with them. He tells us how. In Matthew 7:1, he says, judge not, that you be not judged. Judge not, that you be not judged. If you truly want to help people recover from any kind of failures, physical or problems of emotion or whatever, don't condemn them. Don't condemn them. Don't criticize those who mess up. Don't separate yourself from them as those who are less worthy than you. You know what the word judge literally means when you judge somebody? It means to separate or to distinguish. And in its context, it speaks of those who separate themselves from those they consider bad people. Bad people, evil people. They distinguish themselves as good as compared to those bad people and treat them with contempt. The problem with that is every one of us are bad. Every one of us are sinners. The Bible says there is none righteous, no, not one, in Romans 3:10. All, that means every person that's ever lived since Adam and Eve, have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. That's Romans 3:23. All have sinned. We're sinners. Michael Shermer, the publisher of Skeptic Magazine, interviewed Thomas Canale, the author of Schindler's List. Some of you may remember that movie several years ago, Schindler's List. And Schindler asked Kenley what he thought of the difference between Oskar Schindler, the rescue of the Jews, and the hero of the story, and Ruth, Oskar Schindler, rescuer of the Jews and hero of the story, and then Amon Goeth, the Nazi commander of the Plaszow prison, concentration camp. He asked him the difference between these two. And Kennelly replied, not much, not much. Had there been no war, Mr. Schindler and Mr. Goeth might have been drinking buddies. And and business partners. Moral of truce, perhaps. Maybe their morals were different. But relatively, these two guys were harmless. But what a difference a war makes. Shermer comments especially to the moral choices that lead to good and evil. Here was Schindler, who was employing Jewish people to come from the concentration camp. And the only reason that Hamann Goeth, the Nazi commander of the Plazow concentration camp, wanted it because these Jews were making war equipment for the Nazis. And Schindler was smart enough to roll him over to say, well, just give me more Jews. He saved hundreds of lives. What's the difference? Probably had there not been a war going on, they might have been drinking buddies. But war makes the difference. And then Shermer goes on to quote the Russian author Alexander Solzhenitsyn. If only there were evil people somewhere insidious committing evil deeds, and if it were necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them, but the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being. And who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart? The line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being. It cuts through my heart and your heart, so there is no separating ourselves from bad people, and there's no distinguishing our kind from their kind. It's all our kind. And those who do not invite judgment or condemnation upon themselves. And that's the point that Jesus makes in this verse in Matthew chapter 7, verse 2. For the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged. And with the measure you use it, it will be measured to you. To condemn other people is only to condemn yourself. And the same standard you use will also be used against you. The same standard that I set for you will also be the same standard that will be against me if I judge you or condemn you. In Luke 6, Jesus put it this way: judge not, and you will not be judged. Condemn not, Jesus says, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you'll be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. How? Good measure, pressed down, shaking together, and running over, will be put into your lap. For with the measure you use it, it will be measured back to you, in Luke chapter 6, 37 and 38. And I can say every bit of this is true. I've lived all these years, and I can apply every bit of this to me. What you dish out will come back to you, whether it is commendation or condemnation. Whether it is compliments or criticism, what you dish out will come back to you. You compliment people, you'll have compliments. You criticize everybody, that's what you'll have. My old father used to say, Ray, just remember, you can get a whole lot farther with honey than you can vinegar. And how true he was. Judge Wilhite is a pastor of a church called the Central Christian Church in Las Vegas. And in his book, Uncensored Grace, he tells the story of Cody Huff. Cody Huff is one of his church members. Now, before Cody Huff became a member of the church, he was sleeping in an open field next to the church. He was a homeless person. Before that, Cody made lots of money. I mean, truckloads of money as a famous Bass Pro fisherman who had been featured on ESPN. And I looked him up, and I know Walt did too. I mean, this guy really was pretty big. He had tremendous trophies. But crack and cocaine got a hold of him. His addiction to crack led him to smoke $600,000 worth of savings. His house his new Harley Davidson and his new boat. A man who had eaten in the finest restaurants and socialized with celebrities smoked away everything he had and ended up absolutely homeless. But then God got a hold of Cody. God got a hold of him. Some people from Judd's church were handing out sandwiches in the park where Cody slept on a park bench. And they told him he could get a shower in Central Christian Church. The last place Cody wanted to go to was a church. But he hadn't bathed for so long that even other homeless people couldn't even stand to be around him because he smelled so bad. That's pretty bad. Cody explained what happened next. So Cody walked into the church, and a lady named Michelle, who knew him from the homeless ministry, said, "Good morning, Cody, how are you?" Then she looked at him and said, "Cody, you need a hug." Cody replied, "Honey, you don't want to touch me because I haven't had a shower in 3 months." Well, if Michelle heard him, she didn't seem to care. She walked right up to him, gave him the biggest hug he'd had in a long, long time, and told him that Jesus loved him. In that split second, Cody says, I was somebody. She even remembered my name. And that was the point where he said, I knew God was alive in this world. And over the next few weeks, Cody's life began to be restored. He gave his life to Jesus Christ. He started leading, of all things, a Bible study in the park for other homeless people. Now Cody has his own business. He's married, and his wife and him serve faithfully in their church's homeless ministry every weekend. God changed his life, but it all started with a big hug from one of Jesus' followers. You as a follower of Jesus Christ want to really help people recover from their failures, then start with a hug. Now, we can't do it right now because of the pandemic. So hopefully we can before long. In other words, lead with compassion, not condemnation. If you want to truly help somebody, the first thing to remember is what I said. Don't condemn them. And then the second thing I had tonight is, if we want to help people, we've got to clean up our own act. And lead by example, not examination. Lead by example, not examination. Or as Jesus put it, take the log out of your own eye before you try to take the speck out of your brother's eye. And Matthew 7:3-5 says, why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye when there's a log in your own eye? You hypocrite. First, take the log out of your own eye, and then you'll see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. It's like a man who goes to the family doctor. He says, I think my wife is deaf. She never hears me on the first time. I say something. In fact, I often have to repeat things to her over and over again. She can't hear. She's deaf. Well, the doctor says, I'll tell you what you do. Go home tonight and stand 15 feet away from her and say something. If she doesn't reply, then move 5 feet closer, 10 feet, and say it again. Keep on doing this so we can get the severity of this woman's hearing loss. Sure enough, the husband goes home. And he does exactly what the doctor told him. He stands 15 feet from his wife, who is in the kitchen chopping up some vegetables. And he asks, honey, what's for dinner? He gets no response at all. So he moves 5 feet closer to her. And he said, honey, what's for dinner? No reply. He moves 5 feet closer. No reply. He gets fed up and moves behind her, shouts 1 inch away, and he asks her for the final time, "Honey, what's for dinner?" She replies, "I've tried to tell you 4 times, vegetable stew." So who was the one that was hard of hearing? Who had the hearing problem? Certainly not the wife. So it was when we become critical of other people, who has the bigger problem? Who has the bigger problem? No doubt it's the one who is critical. Because a critical spirit comes from a proud heart, and a proud heart leads to a fall every time. Thomas à Kempis put it this way hundreds of years ago: we blame small things in others and pass over greater things in ourselves. Quickly enough we feel and weigh up what we endure from others, but how much others do bear from us we don't notice. You know who's my own worst enemy? It's me. I'm my own worst enemy. I think others perceive me in a way when they don't perceive me that way at all. There's a man that's quitting his music ministry after 37 years. And he thinks he's building a shrine to himself. The church where he is, finally, they've let him go. He's been there so long, and he can't direct anymore. He can't do his job anymore. But he thinks they all love him, and thinks they all just worship him. And because of 1 or 2 that they are doing him in. What he doesn't know is he's terrible. He's an awful director. But he doesn't see it that way. And I say that not because I'm any better a director, I'm not. But at least I knew when to quit directing choirs because I couldn't hear like I used to. But anyway, he's so critical of all other people around him. We notice the way people hurt us long before we notice the way we hurt them. John Wooden, some of you'll know that name, former basketball coach at UCLA, was unlike many of today's coaches. He seldom left his seat on the bench during a UCLA game. Never got up and stormed around and got mad. He said, "I try to teach the players that if they lose their temper or get out of control, they'll get beat. Modeling was better than words." With that philosophy, Wooden set records that may never be broken in college basketball. From 1948 to 1975, he had a win-loss record of 885 wins and 203 loss games. A phenomenal career. Percentage of his winning was .8.3. He had an 88-game winning streak for UCLA. Players such as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Bill Walton and Walt Hazzard played under him. But a reporter asked Wooden to be critical, very critical. He said, "I'd like for you to criticize your thinking and tell me your thinking about the Indiana University coach, Bobby Knight." As many of you followed basketball back then, Bobby Knight was a wonderful coach and won a lot of games, but had a terrible temper and stormed around and called people names and all that kind of thing. But Wooden would only say, when the reporter asked him to analyze Bobby Wright and give his opinion of Bob Wright, he said, "I think Bob Wright is an outstanding teacher of the game of basketball. I don't approve of his methods, but I am not his judge. And I'm not judging Bob Wright. There is so much bad in the best of us, and so much good in the worst of us, it hardly behooves me to talk about the rest of us." I want to just repeat that again. I think that is great. John Wooden. There is so much bad in the best of us, and so much good in the worst of us, it hardly behooves me to talk about the rest of us. Wow. I wish more people had that kind of an attitude. Our state a better place because critical condemnation only hurts. It never helps. Oswald Chambers, some of you may remember him. He was a devotional book writer. He put it this way: a man who is continually criticizing becomes good for nothing. The effect of criticism knocks out all gumption and power out of someone. If you want to truly help people recover from failure, lead with compassion, not condemnation. And lead by example, not by examination. In other words, don't condemn, get your own act together first. And then finally, in closing, number 3, speak the truth in love. Some people can give you the truth, but they're so hateful the way they say it. Speak the truth in love, Ephesians 4:15. Instead of speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become, in every respect, the mature body. Now, the word instead is preceding in another verse of Scripture. Instead of what the past was, instead of condemnation, speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become, in every respect, the mature body of Him who is the head, and that is Jesus Christ. Lead with wisdom, not alone with words. And don't force your opinions on those who don't want it. Don't give truth to those who are not ready to hear the truth. Jesus said that. Now, what happens when you toss out unsolicited advice? At best, people growl at you, and at worst, they'll attack you. Proverbs 23:9 says, do not speak in the hearing of a fool, for he will despise the good sense of your words. That is so true. There are a lot of people who have to always be right. It's their way or the highway. They're so full of themselves. They won't listen to sound advice. It's like someone once said, you can always tell an expert, but you can't tell him much. You can always tell an expert, but you can't tell him much. That's so true. Don't waste your time. Instead, wait until people are ready to hear the truth. Wait until life brings them low enough that they're willing to look up. Wait until God humbles them enough to be open to the truth. In the meantime, keep loving them. Keep on showing them the way. And then when they're open, point them to Jesus, because He's the Holy One. And then Matthew 13, in that particular chapter, Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in seek of fine pearls, who on finding one pearl, one life, one pearl of great value, went and sold all that he had and bought it. Matthew 13, 45 and 46. He sold everything he had just for one beautiful pearl. That's what Jesus did on the cross. You cannot change anybody, but Jesus can change the worst of people. Nobody can fix broken people like Jesus can. Hebrews 7 says He is able to save to the uttermost those who draw near to God through Him. Hebrews 7:25. Conclusion. If you want to help people recover from failure, don't condemn. Instead, let Jesus clean up our act first. And then speak the truth in love. Those 3 things. Only to those who are open to it. In other words, lead with compassion, not condemnation. Lead by example, not examination. And lead with wisdom. And pray that you can see with the eyes of a doctor, not a judge. That was the name of the sermon. The eyes of a doctor. Why move into somebody's world that for years you have considered a humble person? No, a horrible person. I didn't see that. A horrible person. Why look into someone's world that for years you have considered a horrible person? Because with the eyes of a doctor, you see their hurts that God can heal. You see their bravado and their haughtiness is nothing but a cover-up. You can see their insecurities as merely disguised insecurity and failure. You see marriages where there's no love and children that don't have the security of boundaries. You see, the single mother's loneliness and her vulnerability, and put her at risk of being deeply hurt. With the eyes of a doctor, you can see the hurts that God can heal. It is my prayer for you that you can see people with the eyes of a doctor. You can see people's hurts. You can see people's emotional problems with the eyes of a doctor, with hurts that God can heal, not with faults that you despise.